Anyway, joining us now, let's talk foreign policy, is Joel Rubin. Joel, from Fox News, he's on all the time. He's also a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State under the Obama administration. Hey, Joel, great to have you.
Hey, John. It's great to be with you, man. Thank you.
Lots to talk about today. Let's start with saber rattling. I was kind of shocked.
Woo.
Shocked, as they say. I'm shocked that there's gambling in this establishment. Here's your winning, sir. I was shocked at Mike Pompeo's statement the other day, last night, saying that they're convinced that Iran was behind the attack on Saudi Arabian oil with the drones. And he said, this is an act of war against the United States. I don't think you throw those words around lightly. I know the president. I mean, I've been with him from the beginning. He doesn't want to go to war with these people. He wants out of these wars, out of these regime changes. He was embarrassed in Venezuela. That was a complete disaster. That's why they got rid of the last warmonger they had, John Bolton. What's the deal here?
Well, they're crunching President Trump on the inside. Mike Pompeo flies out to Saudi Arabia before he goes to Capitol Hill to talk to the people who actually have the right to authorize an American war in the Middle East and ask the Saudis for permission. So it's trouble. And yesterday, or 2 days ago, John Bolton, it was reported yesterday, he gave a speech essentially trashing the president's foreign policy because of Iran and how the president didn't want to start a war, which is a cataclysmic concept, to be blunt. There is no good outcome for a war with Iran, and I don't understand why they can't get on the president's team.
Joel Rubin, Iran, 1,000 years civilization from Persia, 90 million people, a formidable military. I mean, this isn't like going into Kuwait or even Iraq. This would be a horrific situation. Plus, the Iranians have a decent military. I mean, what are we going to what are we going to war over? Saudi oil? Are you kidding me?
Yeah, and it's funny, John, because a lot of the left was criticized back in 2003 before the Iraq War when they chanted no war for oil. And the Bush administration took pains to say it's not about oil, it's about nuclear weapons, it's about Saddam and terrorism. Well, Mike Pompeo is not even trying. He's essentially saying they attacked an oil facility, so we need to go to war. And Iran is a country 3 times the size of Iraq. It's not Grenada. It's not something from the early 80s we can go in and have overwhelming force. 3 times the size of Iraq with a significant military. And that's just, it's not a winning war when you have 10 or 20,000 troops in the region. So we need a different path out. And that means a diplomatic path. That means working with our allies. The Saudis understand that Iran could destroy their entire oil infrastructure. I'll just say this one thing here. What the Iranians or the Houthis or whoever just did this attack with the drones, what they were able to do was attack the most important oil facility in Saudi Arabia and not be detected. There are many other more vulnerable facilities all around the Persian Gulf. So it's not as if we control the entire battlefield here. So we have to be very careful.
So who's in charge?
Of our foreign policy or
yes.
of the whole
I mean,
thing?
the president has said repeatedly he doesn't want to get involved in these entanglements, all right?
Correct.
The neocons and warmongers, look, Joe, both of us are in D.C. We get it, right? They permeate the government. I don't know where they came from. They reproduce like cockroaches.
They keep coming back.
They keep coming back. They're like, the rats that are on my street. I mean, I can't, they just walk around like they own the place. And when they start coming up to the door, I got to let out Sammy the cat. He'll eat 2 of them, chop off their heads, leave the bodies around, and then they go back down for 6 months. Then they come back again. It's like you just can't get rid of these people. And so it's almost like triangulation of Trump here, where you've got Pompeo, you've got Bolton, you've got all these neocon warmongers running around. They completely humiliated him into getting involved in the Venezuela fiasco, Joe, which is, I mean, if you look at that, it's got to be one of the biggest failures ever. It's a complete joke. getting involved in that.
And they got one of their own to run it, Elliot Abrams, and he has done nothing, essentially, but make it worse.
So why do they have such influence? I mean, the fact that Pompeo flew to Saudi Arabia to, I don't know, kiss the ring of Mohammed bin Salman. What the hell do I care what Mohammed bin Salman does? He just murdered a U.S. journalist and lied to the president on the bat phone a year and a half ago. Lied to him. A bold-faced lie. How do you trust anything this guy says?
You don't. And that's why we have an independent American intelligence community. That's why we have a network of alliances. That's why we make our own independent assessments. And, when I was at the State Department, I was responsible for engaging Congress. That was my job. I was the senior official handling the work with the Republican-led House of Representatives for Secretary of State Kerry. And we played it straight, and we also had fights. But what we understood, at least in my job, was if you're going to go to war, the first thing you do is you brief Congress, and you talk to them, and you get them on board, because they have to pay for it, they have to raise the money, they have to get the American people on board. And what Secretary Pompeo is doing is essentially dragging the dynamic towards his preferred approach. And I experienced this. I was a career civil servant at the State Department during the Bush administration when John Bolton was a senior official and Dick Cheney was the VP. And they organized in a way that pushed President Bush into a decision that was that invasion. And they maneuvered it. And so my fear here is that President Trump, his instincts are to stay out of a military conflict, but the options that he's being provided are very limited, and that essentially makes him look weak on the global stage. As Lindsey Graham attacked him for saying you look weak, and then President Trump had to, on Twitter, respond, I don't look weak, I look tough. So the guy's kind of on his own at this moment, and yet the American people support where he's coming from more than where the other side is coming from.
Well, look, the bottom line here is he surrounded himself in the administration with your typical 30-year George W. Bush, Dick Cheney, failed neocon, U.S. muscular foreign policy, interventionist, disastrous programs. I mean, that's who's there. And so, Joe, you nailed it. I mean, he's getting triangulated. All the advice he's getting are military first options, which is what they want. I mean, this is what drives these people. They never met a bomb they didn't like. I mean, what exactly does Lindsey Graham want to do? Like drop bombs in Tehran? Like what does he want to do?
Yeah, no, that's what he wants to do, and he said it in many venues over many years. I think in the back of his mind and in the back of all their minds, or maybe in the front of their minds, they believe that they can bomb Tehran and somehow the Iranian regime will collapse and a new group of Iranians will take power.
Right.
Where have we heard this before, right? And they will be pro-American and they will be peaceful and democratic and it will work out, right?
And
I think we've heard this echoes.
I think so. And then they can write a note to Condoleezza Rice and say, let freedom ring, or whatever else nonsense that George W. did. Look, Joe, you don't know me that well, but I got to tell you, I've said on my show 100 times, George W. Bush is going to go down in history as the worst president ever, worse than Carter, Harding. I didn't like Obama. I know you work for the guy. Because the entanglements he got us in, we still can't get out of. Anything Obama did, Trump is unraveling it. Right. You might argue with it, but he's unraveling it. And a lot of the things that Trump is doing, if you don't like that, somebody else comes in, they'll unravel it. But the things that George W. did, like, we're still stuck with it, right? Now, here's my thing. You want to go to war? Fine, right? Here's what I'm in favor of, okay? Tax increase to pay for it. Everybody pays. No earned income tax credit, nothing. Everybody pays a percent, and we have a universal national draft. That's a war, right? That's everybody buys in. Your kid's in the Harvard or Stanford, too bad, they're going. Everybody goes, and you're going to have to pay a tax and pay for it. Let's see how far that goes, right? Let's see what the U.S. public support for that would be. 1%.
You know, it's breaking my heart as you talk, because how many thousands of servicemen and women lost their lives in Iraq? Tens of thousands. When I worked on Capitol Hill, we were dealing all the time with the impacts of the war in Iraq and the traumatic brain injury, the kinds of PTSD, health issues and impacts that will haunt thousands of our people for decades. Mm-hmm. And this is real life. And then you see on TV people who commented about how we should go into Iraq and there will be sweets and treats. And now Bret Stephens the other day said on TV, of MSNBC, New York Times, former Wall Street Journal, he said, oh, we can just destroy their Navy. Ronald Reagan did it in the 1980s, and it'll be fine. And it's shocking that kind of cavalier attitude about violence, unplanned violence, indiscriminate policymaking is something that people who have a track record of failing in their advice when advocating for violence can continue to advocate. And so, no, he's not going to go put on a helmet and go fight these wars. And I agree with you. I think that our decision making is disconnected from the people who feel the impact right now, and that's a deep tragedy.
It's outrageous what is going on in here. I've got a text here from John in Virginia who says, would you ask Joel why we simply don't let Saudi Arabia respond with their military? After all, it was their oil facility that was attacked, and the U.S. is energy self-sufficient. Yeah. How do you respond to that?
Well, 2 points, really important and great question. First, Saudi Arabia has actually been bombing Yemen for multiple years now, and that includes it focuses on the Iranian-backed militia, the Houthis. There are no angels in this region. Let's just put that out there. But Saudi Arabia has been actively engaged in a war, and it's not going well. In fact, the U.S., we've been dragged into it over the Obama and Trump administration periods, and we can't seem to figure out how to get out of it. So I don't have a lot of confidence in their bombing capacity. But second to that, as the United States, our job should be to prevent major conflicts between two large Persian Gulf powers who control about 40% of the world's global oil supply. Mm-hmm. We need to be figuring out how to not let a war break out between them, because once wars start, it's not as if there's some natural endpoint, and you can't predict where they go. So those are sort of the ways to think about this.
You know, we've been down this path before. We've heard it all before. Let freedom ring. Our troops are going to be met with like roses and petals. I mean, you've got to be kidding me, Joe. I mean, we went through this. And, you know, there were people like me on the Republican side. I was against all the wars, including the first one. I mean, I thought the first was like, why are we defending Kuwait? The hell I care about Kuwait. Coupled with the fact that Saddam Hussein, as bad as he was, I mean, he went to our diplomat there, as you know, Joe, you're a student of history, April Gillespie. She said nothing. She said, look, our policy in the Middle East has been the same for 5 decades. You know, we're not going to get involved in your territorial disputes. And Saddam Hussein said, look, that's my, 8th province or something. We had no business getting in there. Let the Saudis defend Kuwait. What the hell do I care? I mean, all this is now, it's like coming back. It's like a bad dream. And it is amazing to me that this president is getting pushed by these people to get us involved in the very things that he said he wouldn't get us involved in. And I know his instincts are sound.
Right.
So, you know, that's the saving grace of this whole thing. You're on the John Fredericks Radio Network. I'm with Joe Rubin, former Deputy Secretary Assistant of State for the Obama administration. And, Joe, you brought up the war in Yemen, which is a complete disaster. I mean, if they were to do on Fox News like every 5 minutes a day of the starvation that's going on in Yemen, of the mothers having to cook leaves on trees and eat bark, and kids starving to death because of the war that's gone on there. And every time the Saudis bomb something, they end up blowing up a school bus. I mean, why the hell are we still involved in that?
That's right. This is the most shameful war on the planet right now. And we have played a major role in backing it, supporting it, aiding and abetting it for several years. And it's been organized by Mohammed bin Salman, the de facto leader, essentially, of Saudi Arabia, the man who, as you pointed out, orchestrated the assassination of an American resident journalist in Turkey. He's not looking out for our best interests. And the question here is, as Americans, when we're engaged in the Middle East, it's not that we just walk away and disappear. That's not the choice. The question is what kind of actions in the region are we going to back? And unfortunately, we have been backing a nonstop air war campaign that has devastated and destroyed Yemen. Yemen is at the poverty level of Haiti. That's the analogy for the Middle East. It's that poor. And for several years now, they've essentially been cut off. Can you imagine several years of bombing into Haiti nonstop? I mean, it's embarrassing. It's horrible. Millions of people starving, displaced, and for no benefit. The objective was to stop Iran, quote unquote, from expanding into Yemen, and I mean, there's no way to measure that. In fact, they've just destroyed the country, and we have to remember in the back of our minds, this was a core base for Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. That was a major focus of American counterterrorism efforts, and that country is now broken. So what's that going to do for the future, like we saw with Afghanistan becoming the home for Al Qaeda a couple decades ago after the country was broken? And so there are bigger picture issues here, and we have just allowed it to flow. And so I'll close with this: the strategic thinking that has guided that war in Yemen, that's the same individual and the same kinds of mentality that could potentially take us into a war with Iran. And that's not a very good look.
It's the neocons and the war-mongers still running around Washington, reproducing themselves in the administration like rats. Hopefully we can get people in the U.S. Senate like Corey Lewandowski who can stop this all, and we can get like an AUMF. I mean, we can't even get an AUMF debated on the floor, right? Like it's even the senators and the members of the House are too afraid to even debate it because they don't want to go on the record. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I want to add, though, interestingly, Matt Gaetz and Ro Khanna, who is chairman of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, did a bipartisan amendment that got through on the defense bill to require American authorization or congressional authorization for a war in Iran. That's now in the Senate, and they're debating whether to include it in their version of the defense bill. So you're right, but there is that tiny little coalition of left and right saying, hey, Congress first before you do anything like a war over there. But it's not even been debated on the floor, and that's a shame. The American people need to hear about it.
Because they're hiding, right? Nobody wants to go on the record, right? So that's why every time they try to get AOMF to the floor, they did it with Paul Ryan several times, and he would dump the thing at midnight and rules. Look, Joe, we've opened down this path, okay? I mean, the power of the neocons in Washington is, I mean, you have to be there like you and I are to really understand. I don't know how they got this power, but it doesn't matter what the administration is. They seem to survive. I got to take off, Joel. I'm out of time. I just got one question here from a listener. Ivan in Northern Virginia says, can you ask Joel what John Kerry advised the Iranians when Kerry met with them when he was out of power?
I wasn't in the room, so I can't speak to specifics, but my hunch is that he basically said, don't do anything crazy. Let's let this nuclear deal come back in if we can, because I'll tell you, John, flaws and all, warts and all, that nuclear deal kept things a lot calmer than they are today. And we had a lot more confidence that they weren't building a nuclear weapon. Things are a much more different place right now. And so I have a feeling that's what Kerry was getting at.
All right. Hey, Joel, thanks for being with us. Joel Rubin with us, former Deputy Assistant Secretary under Secretary of State under John Kerry in the Obama administration. Both of us opposing any of these wars in